David, Love, Mark, please welcome on stage. Enjoy the fireside chat. Thank you very much.
Take it off? It was up there. Let's take it off just for any picture. Grab a mic. It's off.
Thank you.
I know, Love, you hurt your leg, so we brought chairs. No, we had chairs planned. Good. I hope you still have some energy. We wanted to use the time to talk about fundraising. Obviously, all the startups, we have seen them all on the left, right? Their key question at the moment is how to make money, how to bring cash into the company, and this normally comes from two sides, either clients, which is best, or second best is investors. We talk about second best tonight because that's the key focus. Super happy to have David and Love here with me and dive into the topic. Maybe each of you gives a very quick, like who you are, what do you do, and then we dive into some of the key learnings. And for all of the people, maybe we can give the QR code again to the Mentimeter, or I can actually do it, no? Or you have it, can you click one forward? Perfect, Ui. What did I do? Okay, here it's back. Perfect. Scan it. You can ask your questions as well. I will try to get as many as possible in as well, but obviously kick things off on our end first. David, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm David. I'm a senior investment manager at TX Ventures. We're a Zurich-based fintech-only VC, 100 million fund investing in seed, Series A, fintechs across Europe. We love everything from traditional fintech to insurtech, proptech, and digital assets.
Thanks a lot, and also a long-term partner of Tenity and making sure to see the startups very, very early and follow the journey. And Love, maybe you can say a bit about yourself.
So hello everyone, my name is Love and I'm a CEO and co-founder of Relio. At Relio we recently received license from FINMA. So it's called FinTech license, but what we offer is bank accounts for SMEs. And our USP compared to other digital banks Europe-wide is focusing on automating compliance and AML more specifically. So yes, we're live since 1 month. And in case anybody of you needs a bank account, please approach me later.
Well done, took Roy's advice right there, but well done. Obviously, as startups always take any opportunity to pitch and stay remembered. So SME bank accounts, complex cases, Relio can help. Let's dive maybe and start with some of the key learnings that both of you had, and you shared a few points before. But maybe we start this time with Love. Like you are like hammering down how important it is to before you even build, and I do that in like startups can tell you later why startups fail session again. Like how do you validate before you even build, right? How important is this, and maybe what did you do there?
Excellent question. So it's not always easy. It's obvious, right? Because how you measure startup and how you measure success, not only for your customers, but also for your employees, but also investors, and all of this is really needed to get the thing going is traction, and probably a bit boring and everybody repeats, but I know it's, in many cases, there are a lot of obstacles, and when, let's say, 2-3 co-founders start speaking, it's always like, do we bring half-baked product to the market in 2 months, or in 6 months we do it properly? And it's really hard, and it always feels that, you know, we should take tiny bit more time and do it properly, especially in Switzerland. My experience is that, you know, it's always a society that does things really well long-term, but in startups, it's not always best to do everything properly, and it's sometimes important to do something half-baked just to show it to the customers, because only then we really learn and see and could actually then build in the next iteration what's really needed and not really properly something that nobody will ever use. In our, I don't know how much time we have.
No, but like tell us, what is a half-baked bank account?
No, so exactly. In our case, it was quite limiting. So first of all, when we wanted to launch, because with us it's all about onboarding and risk scoring, and we wanted to do this, we almost heard how we will all go to jail because until you get FINMA license, you cannot advertise or even be close to advertise bank accounts. But if you really try, if you really challenge in our case, lawyers, but in generally the world view around you, you can always find ways to offer one part, to have disclaimers, to do whatever it's needed, and then to get to some traction. Because I'm sure, I don't know if it's obvious, but David and TX invested in us. And before that, Six and other VCs like HTGF and some other ones, not to mention them now. I'm sure they wouldn't do it unless they would see at least some early signs of traction.
Maybe you can comment, how did you look at the traction when you invested? Because it was pre-license, as I remember it, was kind of also some conditions. Maybe I don't know how much you can tell about.
Well, I think that's a very specific case. It's probably not the usual case. We don't usually invest in banks. I mean, we invested in one, but that's not what we do all the time. So obviously, anything which is not regulated, it's much easier. You can actually get traction, and ultimately, the best traction you can have are paying customers, right? Pilots are great, POCs are great, but as soon as you have a customer actually paying real cash, that's when you have a proof point, right? Yeah. Specifically at Relio, you can do things through waitlist. You can talk to people, right? We talk to lots of lawyers. We talk to people in the industry to understand how big of a problem that actually is. So you need other ways to get comfort. That being said, obviously, Relio being a FINMA-regulated entity now, that also holds value. And I think you need to look at it in a slightly different angle than what you would usually do in case of a fully sort of regulated financial institution.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And maybe you're touching on trust here as well and credibility and how did it work? And you were mentioning also in the prep like the importance of investing into the relationship. Maybe you can share a bit more on that side.
Well, I mean, investing is like marriage. I mean, it hopefully doesn't last as long, but there's a end date after a few years, right? But still,
why not? It should last forever, right? Because
I mean, we will hopefully.
If we start paying dividend, why like you know like? No,
well, I mean, obviously as a fund, right?
Like
you have a
old couple already.
You can see we're fighting on stage, so we must been married for a while. No, but as a fund. And I think we'll get to that point as well, right? Understand how VCs work. We have a fund, and we have it's an 8-year plus 2-year fund, right? So at some point, we will need to give back money to our investors. So yes, there is unfortunately an end date. Sorry, love. But during that time, it's an extremely close relationship. And as with anything, at the point when you're investing, it's all great and fantastic, and it's all going up. It never does. And it's always easy to have a good relationship when things are going well. When things are not going well, it's slightly different. So really try and build relationships, and the time of 1 week between first call and term sheet, I think those have mostly gone. And I think that's a good thing, because you need to really build relationships and talk about other things than just startups, and see whether you actually also have a fit on a personal level. And that's how you will be able to tackle some of the issues which will come up much better than if it's a purely sort of work-related relationship.
Wonderful, good. You were mentioning also building relationship, but not only with the investor side, but actually with other portfolio companies of the investor.
Maybe just one small remark towards the last thing. No, I fully agree with David, and I think it almost never, at least in my startups, and it's my second or third, it never really goes up and to the right. It goes like this on pitch decks and on traction projections, but it's always bumpy rides. And if there isn't already really good feeling between people, then it's really easy to fall away and not really go through. So really, really important to have good relationship. Yeah. We discussed this before. What would be the points we could mention? So Mark's leading me to one of the top points I raised. For example, when we get closer of agreeing with David and Christoph for the investment, we strategically started literally hanging out with startups they invested in. So you know how they normally tell you for your employees call for reference call. I think it's really important to meet these people and get their trust, because they'll really be able, only then you'll really be able to get at the bottom of how these people actually operate, how it is to work with them. Are they more, give you money and just like call you once a year to deliver KPIs, or do they really want to be involved and call you for 2-hour workshops every second week? So all of these things could also, I know it sounds like a luxury problem, and for many startups, it's like, they would take money from devil himself, but it's really not like this, and sometimes really better maybe getting funded 3 months later or 6 months later with a proper startup. And then you can also get some other things. Maybe you'll learn, maybe David will not like this, but maybe you'll get to learn what's important for VC, what they can really negotiate on, or where they're really firm, or if they already burned their fingers with one or other things, and that's why that clause is so important to them. But there will be maybe something you can get that's not so important to them and still very valuable to you.
I mean, just to add to that, maybe it's funny. We VCs, we always do reference calls, right? We call customers, partners. We talk to the existing investors. We talk to whomever we get our hands on. And then it's funny when startups don't do that. I mean, we do it for a reason, right? And one of the reasons is trying to find out how people tick. So I encourage every startup to do reference calls and talk to portfolio companies and co-investors and that, and whatever, right?
Thanks, David. I wanted to do the same, right? Due diligence on this side. Why not do due diligence also on the other side? And I think that's super important, especially if it's a fund or a company lesser known, right? So like can be total perfect fit, but make sure to have the due diligence also on the startup side, that you go out and do the due diligence. Maybe, David, we jump to this. You said, how does the VC industry work? Understanding you touched on the 8 plus 10-year horizon, and maybe also like when in the fund life you get your investment. What can you share there that is super crucial?
I think it's as soon as you move past the point of getting funds from family, friends, and fools, and maybe the first business angels or an accelerator, and you want to get funding from institutional investors, which, by the way, it's not all sort of the golden route, and that's how you always have to do it. There's plenty of other ways to get to become a very successful startup. And as with anything in life, there's no free lunch, and VC is certainly not a free lunch. But I think it's important you understand how VCs work, both in terms of the financial side of things, like how does a fund work, what's the timeline of a fund, when do you invest, how does it work with initial tickets, with follow-on, etc. But then also, what's the investment mandate of a VC? I see lots of requests on LinkedIn, etc., from startups where it's obviously not in our mandate. We have our mandate on our website, right? If a company from Singapore is approaching me, I mean, I appreciate it, but no, we can't invest in Singapore. So really do your due diligence, and you'll be able to figure out what are your hot leads or maybe not your hot leads, and where do you really have a super good fit, and where does it make sense to maybe talk to your not so good fits first, so you can learn and iterate, and then talk to your A VCs a bit later on. And in particular in the current environment, I think it's also important to check how many deals an investor has done over the last 12 months, right? Fundraising is tough for startups. Fundraising is equally tough for funds. So there are funds out there who are currently between fund 1 and 2 and are struggling to fundraise. They will look at deals because they need to keep deal flow up for their fundraising. They are not actually closing deals. So one easy way to look is, have they done any deals over the last 12 months? If they have not, it's a question whether you want to spend time with those investors or ask them up front, hey, are you actively investing? So I think you can always challenge the investor as well, like where do you stand in your fund life? Are you actively investing, etc.
Will they tell you that they don't invest now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the good ones would, but still, if it's an indication, right? You can see over the last 12 months what have they done, what they haven't done, and that's a good indication. It's really not worthwhile spending time with VCs who don't actively invest. I think it's a waste of your time.
Yeah, well, good point. Thanks a lot. Which maybe leads us to, Love, you said negotiating with VCs, right? And I think many of you are currently also in the situation, and maybe some of the investors on the other side. What would you share? What is the learning on the negotiation side? How to approach this?
So I don't know if there are any good advice with negotiations. The best would probably be to have 2-3 VCs. because if it's a buyer market or seller market, this will greatly, this will be much more important than how you negotiate, because in the end, it's normally clear who has advantage. So on negotiations in general, not really sure what would be the best approach, but apart from having more VCs, probably being open-minded. So some deals at first, maybe you had in your head idea that you will have X million valuation, and then sometimes you're wrong, sometimes VCs are wrong, but it's really good to have. In the end, you will not know, right, unless you try and go that way. But probably good advice would be to be open-minded. It's less about, let's say, valuation today and more about equity storyline. So if you can really raise whatever X million today at Y million valuation, maybe that's not the most critical thing, but if you, with this money, achieve ABC, in 1 year time, you will maybe be able to get to the next stage, and then it really becomes interesting. And the more in future you can project, first of all, the closer you are to reality, because you'll have more data points where you can check some other similar startup in similar markets, in similar industries, what were the valuation. But maybe more important to this is that it's also that you'll be able to really do something, because if you don't have a storyline, VCs will very rarely be so amazed with you and the opportunity to create one for you. So it's something I learned from another VC, and actually he's here in the room on the right. That if I don't project the storyline myself, how can I expect him to go and persuade his IC? And he was kind enough to help me with this, but it's not very often that this is the case. I hope this makes sense.
Totally. Be open-minded. Don't be stuck on maybe a set valuation, and maybe also here and there a term is important. Also, we see cases where the founders just didn't understand the reasoning, right? Also, to the VC, sometimes you need to explain why you need like a liquidation preference in the beginning to.
Oh, sorry, Mark. On that point, I think there is one really good advice. Really stick to standard and always ask VCs if they want. Of course, it's not really easy to know what standard is, but they're probably from 1 to 10, you can probably agree 4 to 6 is standard. And if they want to do 2 or 3, then really ask reasons. Okay, why should this deviate from what normally it is? And there are plenty of documents online. You can see how some of the top VCs in the world are investing, what kind of clauses they like and they don't like. And then when it's deviating from these best practices, there is maybe a point to quote something or to say, look, why don't we do it like this? It's obviously that some other people are doing it like that. And then when it goes to the field of arguments, and not just like I think it should be X, but I see these guys doing it like this because of that. What do you say? Then it becomes more argumentative and less like I think it should be one or another thing.
Yeah.
Just maybe last comment. There are as many market standards as there are lawyers, for sure. So it's always take it with a grain of salt. But no, in Switzerland, use something like SECA and you'll be mostly fine. But I love those lawyer-to-lawyer discussions. Each lawyer always claims he has the market standard.
Just one small comment more. SECA is really VC friendly. And so SECA should be like almost the as bad as it gets, if you ask me.
Agree to disagree.
Perfect. Maybe last point, and then I would like to switch to some questions. Preparation, David. You were how do you prepare? What is the point there?
I'll keep it short so we can get to questions. A well thought through, decent looking pitch deck is usually the first point of contact with an investor, and first impressions matter. So make sure you do good prep. Nowadays you can do super cool interactive data rooms on Notion. Whatever makes you stand out from the crowd is great. But your ability to fundraise is also the first proof point we as investors get of your ability to do sales to customers. So make sure you're well prepped, you learn how to pitch. I mean, all the pitches we've heard so far have been fantastic. If every pitch would be like that, I think it would be a slightly different game. But no, really, do your prep.
Thanks a lot. Let's look at the question. Anything that jumps at you that you would like to get started
It's
with?
fine. Questions are always most interesting. I see
Exactly.
quite a few of them.
Yes. What would you? Is there anything jumping at you? So one is the code. Maybe we can remove that. Seed round size in Switzerland. Typical size. Maybe is a question for now. I would assume, right? Maybe this also has a little bit shifted.
I'm usually not a big fan of calling it seed or Series A or whatever it is. I mean, it's a bit of a marketing thing, but I'd say typically seed 2-3 million is probably a general sort of seed round in Switzerland, but we've seen 10, we've seen less. It ultimately doesn't really matter too much how you call it, but it rather matters how well the size you want to fundraise matches to your current traction and where you stand in terms of your business.
Wonderful. Maybe I guess it's for you, Lev. How important were grants for you in the beginning to get started?
In the beginning, we that's not a grant, right? We got money from Tenity, from F10, but this was a CLA. We didn't get much grants. We started getting grants afterwards. I think up to now we got close to 400K of grants.
What was the biggest?
The biggest one was from World Bank. We still haven't received it, but we got it. So I hope
they should be solvent. No?
It will come soon. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
And maybe just one comment. Normally, startups that are good with grants are not really good with business in general, at least from my experience, because it's very different skill set to get grants and to get VCs and customers, I would say.
Yeah, good point. Like also sometimes getting a grant can be so absorbing that it just makes sense to not get it. Yeah. Raising versus bootstrapping, and it's always an interesting question. And David, you touched on it when you said, look, VC, like there's no free lunch, and also VC is no free lunch, and there are other routes to become a successful startup.
Well, I mean, I have the biggest respect for any founder or founder team who bootstraps. I mean, that's fantastic. If you can keep full control and full ownership of your company, I mean, more power to you. There are certain business models out there, be it a regulated business model, but obviously also, for example, B2C business models where it's just very hard to bootstrap because you need capital to get going and you need to reach a certain size where your business model starts to make sense. But again, if you want to get institutional money, be aware of what it means, both in terms of dilution, obviously, but also in terms of control and governance. I mean, OpenAI is now a very bad example of governance, obviously, but most investors will want to have some governance, some form of control, or at least the ability to influence certain decisions. So just be aware of that. If you can bootstrap, more power to you. Many can't, so raising is the obvious way.
Thanks.
Maybe just very shortly to add on this, what I did, or what we did at Relio and what I did before, I would always make two cases. If I keep on bootstrapping, I expect to get there, to invest so much in marketing and so on, and to get to point A. And then if I don't bootstrap, but I give somebody 20-30% of my company, then maybe I'll be on a different trajectory, and then is 80% of the better case actually worth more or less than the first one, at least theoretically. But I think most of us, at least it was for me, it was not really the point where I say, okay, no longer bootstrapping, now let's have VC money, but that it's a bit of effort and friction to really get there. So I think for most of startups, it's not going to be a really clear choice and decision, but it will take some time to get there.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one of the questions here is looking at the current environment as well, biggest challenges, and obviously we are all aware if we look out, the fundraising numbers have been dropping about, was it over 50%, 54% in terms of volume in the first half year, this versus the previous year. However, only approximately 5% in number of rounds. which seems like
5%.
yeah, only 5% in the number of rounds, which is an indication, obviously, average size going down. Then maybe not the big rounds weren't closed, right? Obviously, the big rounds are also at risk for a down round at the moment because the environment has changed, and you wouldn't raise if you don't have to because maybe the valuation wouldn't be one that, as a founder and also existing investors like. But like some comments maybe from David, and I know you spend a lot of time and we discussed it many times, like what are the challenges now in the current environment?
Well, I think thankfully for many founders here, you're pre-seed seed founders, and I think for that it's slightly different than Series A, Series B onward. Series B ZD is very challenging. The closer you're getting to public markets, the more you're actually measured on public market multiples, etc. So that is a very difficult environment to currently be in, and we are seeing lots of down rounds or at least flat rounds, internal rounds to somehow try and bridge another 6 months in the hope that the markets will recover. Until then, who knows? Pre-seed seed, I'd say, is slightly different. Valuations, I would say, in general, have come down a bit, but not by that much. And I would say you can still close deals. You can still get funding. It usually takes a bit longer, I would say. But yeah, obviously, money is not free anymore, and that has an implication on how much funds are available in the market, and that has an impact on all the terms and how many fundraisers there are and how big they are, etc.
Anything from your end? When did you close the round?
So it's not probably a good question because we signed the round and waited for the license.
Mike it?
Oh, sorry. So we signed the deal more than a year ago, and then it basically even more than that. But then we waited for license to be approved in order to close the deal. So maybe I can't really say at the moment. We can see that there's still some VCs that we get emails from, and it's really hard for me to judge to say anything more concrete.
Perfect. Quick question then, Love, for you. Like, how do you feel about the 100 million limit in the fintech license?
Obviously, we're not really crazy happy for having this limit. But look, first of all, there are ways to go around it, legal ways to go around it, and secondly, it will still take us some time to get there. And once we prove that that it scales and that the business model scaled, probably this will also be a good time to maybe consider upgrading to a full banking license. So at the moment, it's not a limiting factor, and I hope that it becomes very soon.
Thanks a lot. I think I would close it on this. Thank you very much, David and Love, for sharing your